What's up, Facebook? I wanted to go live, try this out. I've been live before, but I've never been live to talk boxing, so I wanted to try this out tonight. Um, it's a lot of talk about Earl Spence and Terrence Crawford that I want to touch on. Um, a lot of my friends are big Terrence Crawford fans, as well as I am. I'm also a huge Earl Spence fan. I think I'm probably a little bigger of an Earl Spence fan than I am Terrence Crawford. But a lot of people are saying stuff like Earl is avoiding or running from Terrence or all that type of stuff, which I totally disagree with. And then some people, Terrence has came out a week before Earl fought and said he'd only fight Earl if he got a 60-40 split. And he got the 60 and Earl got the 40, thinking he deserved the lion's share of the purse. And I've heard a lot of people say, well, he does deserve it, you know what I mean? And I don't get that logic, but I'm gonna talk a little bit about why I don't feel like he deserves it. First of all, he hasn't beaten a top level welterweight yet. I don't care what he did at lightweight. I don't care what he did at 140. Um, you can't come to a new weight class and command not only a title shot, but to be the guy at that weight, and you haven't beaten not one top level guy yet, and expect to get a shot against the unified champion and get the lion's share of the purse. That's first. Second, you got to look at numbers. Um, just this past week, Earl fought Danny Garcia on pay per view, and he got 250,000 pay per view buys. Now, in comparison, when you talk about how you get paid for a fight, viewership, fans, we don't really have ticket sales the way we usually do right now because of COVID. So, that's kind of how you can determine your worth. So you compare Earl's last fight, which, like I said, was pay per view against Danny Garcia, where he got 250,000 buys, to Terrence Crawford's last fight, which was on free TV on ESPN. And even though he was fighting on ESPN on free TV, he still got less viewers than Earl got on pay per view. He got 207,000 viewers. Now, I know the layperson may say, well, that's not that big of a difference. Earl had 43,000 more viewers than Terrence Crawford. He had 43,000 more viewers willing to pay $75 for pay per view. And like I said, and I mean, how many more would he have had he been fighting on free TV? I'm sure there's plenty of people who wanted to see the fight that either couldn't or wouldn't pay the $75. Another thing you look at, okay, he had 250,000 pay per view buys at $75 a piece that generated over 18 million, $18.5 million. I doubt that Terrence Crawford's fight on ESPN generated anything close to $18 million. I'm almost sure they didn't sell $18 million worth of commercial space during that broadcast. So I don't understand how he could feel like he's deserves more money than Earl at this point to fight Earl when there are four major sanctioning bodies. Terrence Crawford holds the least valuable, in my opinion, belt of those four major sanctioning bodies in WBO. Earl has two of the three majors, and the IBF and the WBC. Manny Pacquiao has the WBA. So you're making less money than a champ. You have less viewership than a champ. You fight on a smaller scale than a champ, but you want the champ to defend both his titles against you and give you the lion's share of the money. I just don't. I wish somebody could tell me how that makes sense. I think I don't think Bud or Terrence Crawford wants to fight right now. I think he understands the business side of boxing. He knows there's no way that Earl Spence is going to give him a 60-40 split in his favor at this point. So I think he purposely priced himself out to give himself time to become a bigger star to where he could get a bigger purse. Because right now, it's not even the biggest fight that could be made in that division. Hardcore fight fans may think it's the biggest fight, but as far as generating revenue, the biggest fight that can be made right now is Manny Pacquiao. They're prize fighters. They fight for money. The most money is in fighting Pacquiao. So with that being said, Errol Spence would be a fool to give up the lion's share of his purse and walk away from what would be almost certainly the biggest payday of his career to fight Manny Pacquiao, to take short money and fight on a smaller stage against Terrence Crawford. I heard now Terrence Crawford said something about going back down to 135, which again I think is foolish. Um, I do want to see the Earl Spence Terrence Crawford fight, but I understand the logistics and the business behind boxing. So I suggest that Terrence Crawford take his mandatory, which Sean Porter's his mandatory challenger. Get your mandatory out of the way. That will also put you in a position where you have now fought a top level welterweight, as Sean Porter has been in with Keith Thurman, Danny Garcia, and now Earl Spence, and was in razor thin fights with all three of those guys. So a win against him, especially if he beats him impressively, will put him in a better negotiating stance for the Earl Spence fight and would make the Earl Spence fight a lot bigger. In the meantime, Earl goes and fights Manny Pacquiao, becomes a household name. I believe he'll beat Manny Pacquiao, and then comes in with all three major sanctioning bodies. He'll have the IBF, the WBC, and the WBA. Once that happens again, I think there's still no way that Terrence Crawford would get a 60-40 split, because now Earl's even bigger and comes in with three belts. So if at that point he's still not willing to take 40%, then Earl would probably move up and fight Canelo, another career-defining, huge purse that to me nobody should be mad at him for taking. And I think that will put Terrence Crawford in a pretty bad spot if that was to happen, because by that time you'd have Boots Ennis, who's getting ready to fight for the IBO, who'll be in the title mix at that point. I think Teofimo Lopez is eventually going to be a welterweight. He'll be in the conversation. You're going to have all these young lions who probably already are becoming bigger stars than Terrence Crawford, are going to be looking to get that fight against Spence. And Crawford may be left out in the cold. So I think at this point, I think, Terrence is going to have to humble himself and, maybe go ahead and fight Porter. Understand that he's not going to be the A side. He's not going to get 60% of the revenue. And maybe, go beat Porter. Let Spence go beat Pacquiao. Come back to the table and say, you're willing to take 45% and give Spence 55%. Then, both guys are bigger stars. There's more interest in the fight because everybody's calling for it now. We learned with Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao, the longer you put off the fight, the more people want to see it, the more money more revenue it generates. I mean, it's simple mathematics too, because you figure that to be a tough fight for both fighters. Why fight a tough fight for minimal money when you can, give the fight time to build, go fight other people, while marketing that fight, come back and make a lot more money. It just makes business sense. It's not rock'em sock'em robots. There is no pension for fighters. There is no 401k. So anybody says it shouldn't be about the money, they should just want to be the best. It's all about the money, because once their career is over, it's over. That's it. There is no annuity. There is no pension. Whatever, they killed. They eat what they kill. So whatever they were able to make and hold on to during their career is what they have. Another point I think somebody made to me, well, Spence is already well off. He's already made plenty of money. Again, I say, you assume he's well off. I'm sure, we all know he's made a lot of money. How much of that money does he still have? Is it enough money for him to live the way he's living for the rest of his life? Probably not. If you think about, say he's making $2-3 million a fight. We'll take 40% of that and give it to the IRS right away. It's gone. Then you're talking about manager, maybe 33 and a third percent, trainer, 10%. Your assistant trainer may get 2%, cut man, 1.5%, 2%. How much does he have left? Not to mention he's living off that money now, him and his family. So, I don't think, we can sit back and count people's pockets and say, oh, he has enough money, so he should just fight. It's a business. Any of you guys who own a business should be able to understand, if you're used to doing a job for a certain amount of money, you're not going to take half of that to prove you're the best at doing that job. It just doesn't make sense. Case in point, if I'm a painter and I'm used to getting, $200 an hour to paint, but there's a job somewhere else. I got two jobs at the same time. There's one that's going to pay me $45 an hour. But on this $45 an hour, it's going to give me a chance to tell people I'm the best painter around. Me personally, I don't. I'm not too worried about telling people I'm the best painter around. I'm gonna go get that $200 an hour, and that's what fighters do. They're gonna make the most money they can make in the biggest fight they can make. And the reason why it's the biggest fight is because the other fighter they're fighting has a bigger following. I know a lot of people say, well, the Pacquiao fight is not a fight that not Pacquiao Spence. That's not the fight people want to see. That's not true. Because if people didn't want to see it, the dollars wouldn't be there. Being as though it's a bigger money fight and more dollars there, that means people do want to see it. Maybe not hardcore boxing fans, but hardcore boxing fans are not who make fighters rich. Casual fans make fighters rich. So when you guys are huffing and puffing and saying things or looking down on the casual fan, your casual fan or the person that isn't a hardcore boxing fan are usually the ones that spend the money that allow these guys to live the lifestyle they're living. So they have to kind of appease them. Of course, with his at the end of the day, at some point you're going to think about your legacy and how you're going to be remembered, which is important, but not as important as what your bank account looks like when it's all over. Because as everybody who follows boxing knows, every fighter is risking his life every time he enters the ring. What is that worth? I mean, every fight could potentially be a career-ending fight, career-ending or life-ending. With that being said, I'm making as much money as I possibly can every time I step in the ring. Anybody who thinks different is foolish. It's my first time. Like I said, I'm not gonna hold y'all for long. I just want to give my thoughts on it. So, like I said, all you Terrence Crawford fans, and I'm a fan too, but you guys that are saying Earl is scared or Earl is running, encourage Terrence. Take the Sean Porter fight, which will solidify you as a legitimate welterweight. You then have a legit contender under your belt. If you can do it impressively, maybe even more impressively than Earl did or that Keith Thurman did, it makes it increases your star power and puts you in a better negotiation stance when you go to negotiate the Spence fight. And even in that, if Spence beats Pacquiao, you're still going to be talking about 45% realistically. So if you want it there to be great, you want a chance to unify the division, you want a chance to fight the top dog, you're going to have to humble yourself, take the 45%, and make the fight happen. You win the fight, overnight, you're a big dog. But if you never fight the fight, you go back down to 135. I think that diminishes you a little bit. So I mean, that's something Terrence Crawford should think about, and also his fans who are running around saying Earl is ducking him. It's not the case. It's not the case. It's not Rock'em Sock'em Robots. It's prize fighting. He has to do what's best for himself, his bank account, and his family. All right, y'all. Have a good night.